Welcome to Policing TV. I'm delighted to be here for this third of three videos with former Staffordshire Chief Constable John Giffard. Here we are recording this in Stafford, the county town of Staffordshire. John, thank you so much for joining us here on Policing TV. In this video, we're going to talk about the future of policing. And at the tail end of the second video, you mentioned technology. Would you like to pick up on that?
We didn't have ANPR in my day.
Automatic number plate recognition, yeah.
We had to ring through to something called the Vehicle Central Index to see whether a car was stolen. No police national computer, no nothing. And eventually we got decent radios, having had a long period of very bad radios. One of the things when I first came back to the force that everyone was screaming blue murder about. But we managed to get it sorted out in time. And technology, the bigger the project, the longer it goes into delay and extra expense. Some forces are getting things through in reasonably good time. Others are finding the technology is delaying them and wasting a lot of money. And having to throw things on the scrap heap. But technology will not answer everything. It won't pick up that detective sense of there's something wrong here, but it will probably, if you work out that there is something wrong, it'll probably give you the answer.
So that's that detective sense, that police officer sense of something not quite being right is invaluable.
Yes, I think so, and I think that's one of the weaknesses, perhaps, of the principle that Mrs. May set out, which was to get everybody.
Former Home Secretary,
and Prime Minister.
Subsequently Prime Minister Theresa May.
And I think Mrs. May had in mind that the police would take austerity like everybody else, and carved away at a lot of the extra expenditure which would have normally gone on to technology. And I think we suffered a lot from that. We have a lot of people who came into the force as graduates. There was an insistence that they were graduate entrants, not under the graduate entry scheme which I joined under, but just as they had to have a degree to get into policing. But a degree in zoology or something like that, it doesn't do you a lot of good for working at the back end of Stoke-on-Trent on 3 o'clock in the morning when you know what's going on.
So the degree is not the necessary part?
I never thought it was. The fact that you were able to write an essay and put things together into some coherent form probably helped. But it's not the streetwise person that I want, who driving along the road in a car or walking along the street on foot knows that something is going wrong and something that needs intervening in going wrong.
How do you find those individuals, though, when you're looking amongst recruits?
Well, the ways in testing, you know when you're testing people. If you do a decent, sensible interview process, you can. One of the dangers, of course, is doing it in your own image. But rarely have I found people in my own image, so that's okay.
Well, we discussed the benefit of diversity, of knowledge, skill, and so on in video 1, I think.
Yeah.
And so we'll come back to technology in a moment or two, but sticking with the recruitment pool, and I'd like us to explore this in 2 parts. One of which is who should the police try to recruit, acknowledging that police pay is not what it might be in comparison to the basic level of wage. And also, I'd just like to talk about Chief Constable recruitment as well. But let's start with who should the police be looking to recruit, and how should they go about recruiting them?
I think, first of all, I think they should be recruiting locally wherever you can. The Metropolitan Police obviously can't do that necessarily, because they need more than London capable of producing. So they have to go outside. And that's when it all starts getting a bit tricky, because they offer more money than Bedfordshire and Essex and Hertfordshire and all that lot. And it's attractive to move over the border quickly to get an extra 6,000 quid, which is a perfectly reasonable decision. So that's one bit. I always thought we could get away with recruiting locally here and sticking to keep recruiting locally wherever we could, with a few transferees coming in because they met somebody at training school from the source, or for some reason they needed to come to Staffordshire, which was good. So transferees, of course, free, so they come usually you don't have to give them any extra training, and that means you've got some decent, effective street work from them straight away, which is good. So I would prefer to recruit locally where I can, and that increases the sense of family around the force. The force is a wide family, so that's preferably, rather than looking all around the country, putting out a genuine advert for.
And then on Chief Constable recruitment, again,
Yeah.
England and Wales, we have a situation where very few senior officers, typically Deputy Chief Constables, are putting themselves forward for Chief Constable vacancies. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I looked round and couldn't see, sometimes I couldn't find the next 5 chiefs, looking around all the deputies and how recently they'd all been appointed. And it's coming quite clear to me that you only have to do 1 or 2 years as an ACC before you get a deputy's job now, because they're so desperately short of people applying for deputies. And some of that is people don't want to move force. That was always an issue. We were forced to move force in my days. Well, you weren't forced to it. You could stay in your own force up to a certain point, but you couldn't go the whole way to chief in the same force. That's changed now. But it was getting people who were really competent enough from what they had done in the last 4 or 5 years as an ACC, where they probably hit most difficulties. And the people kind of lack of experience was one of my worries. And if you come to a job like Chief Constable with a lack of experience under your belt, something will go wrong somewhere. And that's where I'm concerned about it. But I've been proved wrong by several people who have come in on the superintendent direct entry, some of whom are performing outstandingly well. I don't know about the whole of the situation there, but I do know that some of them are doing very well, and that's encouraging.
You mentioned in the podcast that I referred to a little earlier that hopefully we will be republishing on Policing TV. You mentioned that under your time as chief, you had quite a record of bringing through the ranks future chief constables and future deputies, not just for Staffordshire.
18 chiefs.
18 chiefs.
18 chiefs on my ticket, and another 18 or 19 deputies.
So there's quite a number of chiefs that had Staffordshire somewhere on their CV.
Yes, they did.
What was the skill? How did you go about doing that? Was it a conscious effort too?
Yes. I always tried to pick people who were going to be chiefs as our ACCs. We deliberately didn't want somebody who wanted to stay as an ACC. Because that was not going to move us forward as fast as we wanted to go. And it probably wasn't somebody who was going to challenge me enough, because I wanted my ACCs to challenge me.
So you were looking for ambitious,
Correct.
in a career sense,
Absolutely.
Assistant Chief Constables.
Yeah, move on quick, 2, 3, 4 years as ACC. And then they went in 6 out of 6 on the candidates list to forces and suddenly came out with a job. Steve House went to Scotland. Steve Green went to Nottinghamshire. And they were amazed that this chap turned up and went from the least favoured candidate to getting the job. So 18 people whose careers as chief, before they became chiefs, had been influenced in some way by me. Because 1 or 2 of them, like Alex Marshall, did the bureaucracy work when I did that for David Blunkett. He came in as the superintendent on that and ended up as Chief of Hampshire. And one of my assistants in the Home Office on the amalgamations was Doug Paxton, who ended up as Chief of Suffolk. I counted him because I had 6 months of him, and I counted him on my 18.
It's quite a record.
It's not bad. It's not.
I think it would be difficult to. I haven't done the analysis, but I think it would be difficult to challenge.
Yeah.
Let's move to technology, and I think then after technology, I do want to return to technology here, and then we'll probably bring this video to a close. Yeah. But on technology, your earlier remarks led me to thinking about whether forces, and bear in mind there are approximately 43 in England and Wales, all doing their own thing, versus being compelled to do a single thing, versus maybe a small number of variants across the 43. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, when John Hodenock broke the AFR consortium for fingerprinting,
former Chief Constable, and I believe, was he ACPO chair?
President of
ACPO.
Yeah, and when John Hodenock took all 30 of the 43 forces out of the NAFIS project and into AFR consortium, I went to work from North Yorkshire. I went to work for him as a manager, second tier manager, as it were. And we had a very interesting time, including pulling the plug on IBM, which was brave because they weren't producing what we wanted. So the bigger technology problems have run the greater risks. The people who manage them in the Home Office are very willing, but sometimes not. I'm careful what I say here. Sometimes difficult to handle. And if a big project goes wrong, it will always be an immense delay. Whereas individual forces doing individual things, okay, but we keep trying to sell them. Then people can try to sell that stuff around everywhere else. And some have it, some don't have it. And some are better funded, so they're able to buy things and others are not. And so the poor mites of Staffordshire can never get much by way of technology because they haven't got a lot of spare cash here, because the funding formula is a problem for them. And the funding formula was a terrible problem in North Yorkshire as well. And it's a bit unfair that everyone else was.
So would it be fair to say that the current nature of forces, where there are some with very limited resources and others with
lots,
with much more,
yeah.
That actually there's no clear
I don't think there's a clear IT strategy.
It's a challenge.
Yeah.
There may be some IT projects where the nature of the information sharing means that there needs to be a single or at least several compatible, entirely compatible systems, but no clear-cut solution on the technology side, as far as you believe?
I think that's right. I haven't been close enough to be certain about that.
I think at this stage we've covered a lot of ground, John, and I'm very grateful to you for spending time with me and with Policing TV. It's fascinating. Hopefully we'll pick up again at some point in the future, but can I thank you profusely for the time being, for the time that you've given us. Thank you so much.
I've enjoyed it. My pleasure. Really enjoyed it. And nice to be called back to the colours occasionally.
Thank you.